This is George back with the New Hunter's Guide, and today we're going to talk about scouting for deer. How do beginners go about this process of trying to find a good place to hunt deer? First and foremost, the thing you need to remember is that deer are creatures of edge. Take that phrase, creatures of edge, write it down, ingrain it into your mind. There's no single tidbit of information that's going to help you more and contribute more to your success than being constantly reminded that deer are creatures of edge. What does that mean? What are creatures of edge? Deer love edge. Edge is when habitat changes. When you have fields that turn into grass, that's edge. When you have grass that turns into woods, that's edge. When you have fields that turn into brush and briars and stuff, that place where the habitat changes, wherever it's going to and from, it's open to cover, it's cover to forest, it's open to forest, it's water to forest. Anywhere where there's edge, there's high altitude to low altitude. There's food to cover. There's bedding area to trail. Anytime where you have a change in habitat, you're going to find more deer and congregation of deer. They're going to live there. They're going to move there. They're going to eat there. They're going to bed there. Those are the kind of things that attract deer. I don't know if you know it or not, but today there is more deer in the United States of America than there was the day that Christopher Columbus first set foot on this continent. People say, how could that be possible, George? How could there be more deer today? Well, back then you had old hardwood forests, big, tall, mature timber, very little brush, very little edge, very little food, browse, the woody shrub tips, the briars, just the grasses, the stuff sticking out of the ground that deer eat. Not that they eat grass, but they eat weeds and they eat shrub tips and they eat pieces of bark and regrowth from trees and whatever they can chew pretty much, especially in the winter, they're eating. Well, back then, you had less cover, you had less food, you had less deer per mile than you do today in a subdivision. No joke, you have got more deer today living around housing plans than you did in the open timber of North America several hundred years ago. We have more deer today than we did historically because we've got fields, we've got more edge, we've got woods that turn into fields, that turn into brush, that turn into housing plans, that turn into highways, that turn into brush again, that turn into timber. And we've got all this going on, and there's way more places for deer to bed, hide, eat, and go about their business. Yeah, they might not have quite as many square miles, but you've got, several square miles of just open, mature hardwood timber is only going to have a few deer in it because there's not enough habitat for them to survive. There's not enough food. There's not enough cover. There's not enough security and safety for them to raise their young. There's not enough to keep fawns hidden and safe. But you take a housing plan and a fallow field and some trees and some overgrowth, brush, thorny garbage, you have way more deer than you ever could have in a 300-year-old hardwood forest. So today we got more deer, but it's all because of edge. We have way more edge. And when you're scouting for deer, you're looking for edge. And please, before we go any further, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that button, hit that like, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification to make sure you get updates from future shows. Got a lot of stuff for you guys. And make sure you check out the podcast, New Hunter's Guide. It's on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you could listen to podcasts. And of course, the website, newhuntersguide.com, where I've got 140 plus episodes as of this recording. But you've got edge is what you're looking for. Now, there's 4 main things that you're looking for in addition to that to try to narrow it down, right? Deer need 4 main things day in and day out. You need water. Water is super important. Deer don't drink a lot of water, to tell you the truth. But the bucks especially are going to be drinking water in the rut and during the pre-rut because of how much they're cruising. But more than the fact that deer don't drink a lot of water, a lot of things happen around water. Does don't need to drink most of the year. They get all the moisture they need from what they eat. But what you have around water is the habitat that deer are going to be drawn to. You're going to have brush. You're going to have stuff growing. You're going to have things they can eat. You're going to have other animals coming. You're usually going to have higher concentrations and densities of wildlife and cover around water. So water is a good sign. Now, a 500-acre lake, obviously you can't hunt that. That's not helping you. But around the edges of that lake, around the corners of that lake, you can find habitat that is good for deer. And then deer may even, in marshes and swamps, they may even push out some into that to find places hunters don't go in order to find safety. So water is good. Also, wherever you got water, you've got softer ground. Softer ground means you can see deer tracks. So water's not just good for drinking. It's not just good for habitat. It's good for being able to identify sign. A lot of people, when they think of deer hunting, they're going straight for monster bucks. That's unrealistic. That's also ridiculous. I actually recommend new hunters go out first trying to get a doe. Does are an easier animal to hunt. It requires not as much difficulty and complication and strategy maybe as a buck does, but all the while you're learning. You're learning. Go after does. Go after younger bucks. Don't sit there and go, I need to get a 12 point my first year. I don't know. Maybe you live in a part of the country where that's realistic. Where I live, I've never seen or even heard of a human being taking a 12 point in my lifetime. So different parts of the country, you've got different age ranges of deer, different size of deer. But in any event, get out there and get a doe. Most states you can get doe tags. Often you can get more than one. Get out there and get the first deer you can take and get the experience, learn how to cook it, learn how to field dress it. You can always go out the next day and try to get a buck. I guess the bigger point of advice is don't be choosy. Take the first opportunity you get as a new hunter. Because I'll be honest, I spent years trying to get my first deer. Years. And I've known people who, because they've listened to the podcast and they've gone through some 40 episodes on deer hunting and had strategy and found spots and knew how to do it, got out there, took 2 bucks in their first 2 days. But I didn't have that. For me, it was a hard road. And I remember taking my first doe ever and how exciting it was. And I was just beside myself at how amazing this pursuit was. So, look at what you have the opportunity to take and hunt that. The next thing that deer need is food. Deer have to eat. There's no question about it. They've got to eat. Deer feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. They feed twice during the day, 3 times during the day and twice at night. They feed right at daybreak. Either they're on their way back at daybreak from eating or they're finishing eating on their way back to their bedding areas. So they're eating right about daybreak. They're eating in the mid-morning, right around, somewhere between the 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. or to 12 noon time slot. They're munching. They're browsing. They're eating whatever they can nibble on close to where they bed down. They're not traveling a lot of distance much of the time. They're looking for daytime browse, things that they can munch on close to home. Then you have the late afternoon feeding, which is the biggest one. This is before dark. This is the last hour or 2 of the day most of the time. This is when you're going to have the most movement often for deer. So usually the best time to hunt deer is the morning and then late afternoon. But you're going to have a lot of movement for deer going to eat at the end of the day. And then once the sun goes down, they feed usually about twice more. And that doesn't really matter so much because you can't hunt them then. But you got to think, deer are looking for food. So they're going to be looking for food at first light. They're going to be looking for food mid-morning, midday, and then they're going to be looking for food close before the sun goes down. So you want to find food. You're looking for public land. You're looking for cover, for edge, for where habitat changes. You're going to find food there much of the time. You at least browse. Anytime that you have openings and places where there's space, you're going to find food. So you want to keep your eyes out. Food comes in all different forms for deer. Deer eat clover. They love it. It's a great thing to plant. I'm going to do an episode about that sometimes down the road. It's cheap, super easy. Deer eat all sorts of traditional crops, corn, grains, wheat, alfalfa, brassicas. They love all that kind of stuff and much, much more. Anything people eat that we would grow, basically deer eat. So if you've got that stuff around you, you can position yourself accordingly. Deer also, they love browse. They love shrub tips. They love hardwood regeneration. When a tree cut down, you've got branches that are coming out at waist height. Deer love to eat the tips of those branches, the baby branches, the new things that are coming out. They love weeds. Weeds are huge. Deer often like weeds more than human food, but weeds are dead after the first frost. So come hunting season, that's not much of a viable option in most locations. Deer like acorns and pretty much any mass that falls off a tree. Apples, pears, whatever you've got, peaches. They'll go for all of that. So you want to think about these things in the seasons, and you want to figure out where is food, and more importantly, where do deer walk to get to food? As I've said in previous episodes, it's better and easier much of the time to hunt travel corridors, to hunt trails, than it is food plots or food areas. Because when deer are eating, they're more on guard. When they're traveling, it's a lot easier to get the jump on them. When they're walking through, their eyes are where they're going, their focus is where they're going. They're not doing this 360, look, listen, and smell in between bites. You've got a much less chance of spooking them if you're hunting them on a trail where they're going. And trails are number 3. You're looking for places that deer move. Now, you identify trails by the sign of what deer have been there. So you're looking for prints. You're looking for droppings. You're looking for scrapes. You're looking for rubs. You're looking for any sign that says deer walk through this area on a regular basis. The path of least resistance is real in deer hunting. People, we like to take the path of least resistance through the woods because it's just easier to cover ground without having to push through brush and briars and jaggers and garbage. Deer the same way. They like to go the easy route. So you're looking for trails, things that are established, that weave through the woods, not necessarily man-made trails. Though if you've got property and you've got lots of thick, dense garbage, it may not be a bad plan to make some of your own trails. Just 2 and 3 feet wide. That's all it needs to be. If it's big enough to drive a car through, it kind of can spook deer, and they think, oh, this is too big, I'm too exposed. So smaller is better when it comes to trails. So you want to look at that, think about that, ponder that, look for those places where they're coming through. Much easier to hunt a trail. And really what you're doing here is you're trying to identify, okay, here's food, trail goes to that food or from that food to cover. That trail is the kind of trail that you want to be on. Because deer are going to be coming and going on a regular basis from food to cover, from bedding to food, from bedding to cover. And you've got that working for you. You've got that opportunity, and that's a great place also to set up a trail camera. Called that for a reason? Maybe. Trail cameras. So you want to look for places like that where you see a lot of sign, where you see a lot of deer movement. Those are the 3 things that deer have to have. The other thing you need to have to hunt deer are vantage points. You've got to be able to see something. And depending on what season you hunt is going to determine the way you think about vantage points. So the term shooting lanes is thrown around a lot. That's basically the line of sight or the line of projectile between you and where those deer are going to be. So you might have cover over here, you've got a window here, where if that deer's on the trail, boom, you can nail them. If they go too far, they're back in the cover, you can't see anything. So you need to have vantage points. You got to have shooting lanes so that you're able to actually get a good shot off at that deer. Now, if you're hunting rifle season, you have the advantage of being able to have a lot more distance between you and the animal. You can be at 50 yards, 100 yards, even further than that. Some states you can get a shot off at much more distance than that. So you have that opportunity. You can put a little bit more distance between you and the trails. You can hunt a little bit more open areas. If you're hunting archery, or crossbow, which of course is archery, you need to be a lot closer. So the way I like to set up, depending on what I'm hunting with, is I don't want to be able to see that deer further than I can shoot him. So, if I'm hunting with a crossbow, for example, my goal is to set up so I can't see anything further than 30 yards in any direction. Don't want to see further than that, because I don't want that deer to be able to see me before he gets in range and then doesn't come in range. So 30 yards is real nice there, because as soon as I see that deer, he's close enough to shoot. And I could not have spooked him before he got that close. If I can see 100 yards and I'm hunting with a bow, that doesn't work so well, because now the chances of me spooking the deer are much higher. The chances of them noticing you, seeing something out of place, much, much higher. So I like to have that closer distance when I can. Ideally, the way you set up is you just never see more than you can shoot. And I think that gives you the best chance to ambush a deer. Now, if you're hunting long range, of course, that's going to change that game. But in most places, most deer are taken under 100 yards. Actually, most are taken under 50 yards, even with rifles. So don't feel like you need to see 1,000 yards to hunt. It's better to have limited range, limited field of view, and then be able to reach out that whole field of view. So if you're hunting with a vertical bow, if you can keep everything at 20 to 25 yards, that's ideal. So that you can't see anything further than that, and that deer can't see you from further away. So you got to find water, you got to find food, you got to find trails, you got to find vantage points, and it's all about edge. Where is edge? If you've got elevation that goes from high elevation to low elevation, both points at the bottom and at the top before the drop are going to be edge points. Those are both areas that you could look at, the high point and the low point. The deer are going to walk that rim before that drop off, or deer are going to walk the bottom of that hill before it starts to go up. And sometimes you could have two monster bucks that live right next to each other, separated by 100-foot drop. And the one deer walks the edge at the top, the other deer walks the edge at the bottom, and they almost never cross over. They have completely different ranges, even though they're super close to each other, because that elevation keeps them apart. So you want to look for things like that. Wherever you find edge, you're going to find deer. If you've got water, food, trails, and cover, you're going to have deer. So the other thing that deer have to have is cover. Can't live without it. Gotta have it. Deer need cover to bed. They need cover for fawns. Bucks, even though they're the biggest, strongest, baddest deer in the woods, they need to have cover to feel safe. So wherever you've got dense, thick stuff, you're going to have deer. They're gonna hide in there. They're going to bed in there. They're going to be able to raise fawns in there. You need cover. Cover protects deer from predators. It protects them from people. So you want to try to hunt the trails in and out of the cover. The trails coming in and away from the food. The trails coming to and from the areas with water. And then you want to set up your vantage points. So you're looking for tracks, you're looking for droppings, you're looking for scrapes, but those things by themselves aren't enough. You need to find the places where deer are going to be on a regular basis. A deer can walk through the woods anywhere once a week, once a month. Hunting that spot's not going to help you. You need to find where they congregate. So these are the things that you can use to determine what are high traffic deer areas, where are deer at regularly, where can I set up and have the best chance of seeing a deer in a 4 to 8 hour period. Those are the places that you're looking for. Water, food, trails, cover, and then you got to have a good vantage point. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. Head to the website, newhuntersguide.com. Check out the podcast, all the other episodes. I've even got my videos organized there as well by topic. Make sure you subscribe, hit like, leave a comment below. And then till next time, God bless you guys, and go get them in the woods.